Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Expert Talks, the video podcast series of Zoho Contracts. I'm Akhil, a customer experience lead with Zoho Contracts, and today we have with us Smitha Chandrashekhar, the legal director at HARMAN International. In this podcast, Smitha sheds light on India's new Data Protection Act, the DPDPA, its implications for businesses, and the role of effective contract management in achieving compliance with the DPDPA. So, without further ado, let's dive right in.
Smitha, could you please give us a brief overview of the DPDPA? What are the key provisions and how does it compare with other international frameworks like the GDPR?
Right. Okay. I think DPDPA is definitely a new age law to begin with, right? Because it is comparatively new in comparison with all the other existing global privacy laws. In terms of a quick comparison, of course, DPDPA is futuristic, and also in terms of the scope, it's a lot more wider, right? So, couple of things that I'd like to point out here is one is definitely in terms of the applicability or the scope of DPDPA, right? When you compare GDPR with DPDPA, GDPR basically, it's applicable only on non-digitized personal data / personal sensitive information, right? But then that is not the case with DPDPA because, the DPDPA in fact focuses on all forms of personal data in its digital form or non-digital form, which is pending to be digitized, right? So that I think is the first major difference, right? So I think that is where most of the data itself, broadens, or the scope of the DPDPA is actually quite broad, right? Next one, moving on, I'd like to touch upon a little bit about the concept of consent, right?
Yes.
So the GDPR as well as the DPDPA are majorly aligned towards the purpose of seeking consent, right, from the data subjects, as well as, from a principal perspective, data principal perspective, the principal has to basically make sure that the consent is actually obtained, right? And also further, the Act in fact mandates that the data principals must be given various options of accessibility, right?
Yes.
Including to be able to view that consent is in different languages. Now, I think these languages, this aspect, is very unique to India, right? So I think this is another feature which really stands out as far as the DPDPA itself is concerned, right? Next couple of things are cross-border. While I think GDPR is pretty heavy on that, as of now, I would not like to comment anything about the DPDPA simply because I'm sure that the rules, when they come out, will contain more information about that, right?
All right. So the rules are not yet out. For example, the
Yeah,
time
the rules
period
are
for
not.
the organizations to stay compliant, all of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What are the implications of the DPDPA on organizations, especially with respect to contract management? And what do organizations need to do immediately in order to stay compliant with the DPDPA?
Right. I think most of the organizations, Akhil, in fact, are taking a back seat, right? Or they are in fact considering a step-by-step approach now. See, because it's too early for any of us to comment what exactly needs to be done. But what I can suggest and what I can answer is that, we need to be mindful of what digitized data, personal data it is that the organizations are collecting, for what purpose is that data required, and where is that data residing, right? So this is as far as all the third party data is concerned. Now, from an organizational standpoint, the other big chunk of data, personal data, which is readily available in any organization is the data of the employees, right? So I think that forms the major chunk of the actual personal data which resides on the servers of every organization, irrespective of what field the organization is operating in. So I think these are the two main things, right? Other than that, where is the data originating from? It may be certain marketing related insights or whatever, which the marketing teams usually kind of collect. and then the company websites, right? I mean, the traffic is, usually monitored by all the major organizations, data analytics and whatnot. I mean, the new age AI tools and so on and so forth. So personal data is kind of there, spread out everywhere. Other than this the another good starting point would be, especially for a multinational kind of an organization, where is it that the server is located and from where the data is going where, right? I think these are the two major important aspects which the organizations need to consider. Now, the only reason why I gave this in-depth overview is that, first of all, the organizations need to understand where exactly all the personal data is actually residing. Once they get hold of that particular information, the rest is easy, right? I mean, especially from a DPDPA standpoint, whatever needs to be done, first of all, I think it's the contracts, right? If it's the customer contracts, again, you're dealing with another set of personal data. So how do you exactly manage your contracts? What clauses you have, in place? It's not just restricted to contracts, unfortunately, because if the data is actually coming in, what sort of implementation systems, systems you have in place, especially the information security systems, what sort of access controls you have in place, and also, how long is that data going to be stored for? All these three major points need to be carefully considered, right? So now, as far as the contracts itself go, different organizations follow different approach. So it would be wrong for me to kind of go and particularly comment on what should be there or what shouldn't be there. I think by and large, as long as the data is protected, that's the ultimate goal, right? So as far as contracts are concerned, that's that. Next, like I said, the employee data, employment contracts, onboarding documents, any other employment related policies which are in place, all have to be revised, because we or the organizations collect lots and lots of personal data from our employees, including bank statements to whatnot, right? So all of that needs to be safe and secure. Thirdly, the information security team. I mean, what is it that they are doing? I think an audit should be conducted internally to make sure that, what processes are there in place, where is it that we are lacking, and then where we need to head towards. Last but not the least, grievance mechanism, right? Because the DPDPA itself contains or talks about having a grievance officer in place, right? So that needs to be in place. And of course, you need to have a strong mechanism. Of course, on a related note, we do already have the certs in requirement where, 6 hours of reporting and all of that is already there. So to a great extent, most of the things are already covered due to the IT rules, IT Act itself. We have been following. It's just that certain elements, depending on where the maturity level of the organization is, need to be fine-tuned. I think overall, that's my 2 cents.
Smitha, I wanted to ask you now, contract management would involve a lot of collaborations with other functions within the organization, right? So, could you throw some light on the cross functional collaboration and also collaboration with vendors and also international data transfers?
Absolutely. That's a very valid and a practical question. Thanks for that, Akhil. So I think on that note, yes, contract management is actually not a legal team's job as such, right? Because there are various other elements involved during the life cycle of the contracts. And then, yes, different teams definitely do get involved. Now, from a DPDPA standpoint, I think majorly what happens is that, first of all, the sales teams, right? Because they are the ones who are, I think, in a way, sole custodians of all the customer data, which does contain personal sensitive data as well, right? So again, I think that is where the sales team should work closely with the information security team to make sure that, first of all the data which is obtained from the customer is duly protected, as well as access controls are in place. That's point number one. Point number two, internally, I think the organization kind of needs to analyze, other than the legal team and the sales team, who are the other relevant teams, maybe your operations team, the finance teams, and also any other business units in particular which may have access to all this particular data, right? So again, where is the data residing, what needs to be done, I think that needs to be managed. Now, in terms of cross-border data transfer, I think today, especially for the MNCs, it's very common to have these cross-functional teams located all over the world and data travels all over the world, right? So a couple of aspects which need to be again carefully considered is that where are the data centers of that particular organization located? Again, are they governed by GDPR? Are they governed by DPDPA? Because what sort of data is actually flowing in, flowing out? I think the regulatory team, in fact, should do a good job by covering the legal aspects or the regulatory aspects to see which laws, first of all, govern that particular cross-border data transfer, right? And according to whatever the regulatory requirement is, I think the organization then needs to have a strategy and implement it. That's the next crucial aspect. And other than that, in terms of having data transfer agreements in place, right, with various organizations or the third parties that the organization works with, because ultimately it's not just one organization which would be entrusted to make sure that the data is in place, but also, like you rightly said, Akhil, it's the suppliers, it's the subcontractors and other vendors that the organizations work with. Now again, go back to basics. What sort of contracts that the organization has in place with these third parties? I think it needs to start from there. What sort of data protection provisions exist in those contracts? Again, those need to be analyzed. Last but not the least, I think it's very important for the organization to have audit clauses, right? And the audit clause should be pretty broad enough to also make sure that there is data protection related audit also, which gives the right to an organization to conduct these things. And apart from all of this, I think sensitizing all the stakeholders who are involved, or in other words, regular training, regular updates need to be provided to all the stakeholders so that they understand what the legal requirement is, so that the organization complies from a 360 degree. So I think these are a few key points. Of course, there's much more to it.
Oh, thank you, Smitha. Again, very insightful. Smitha, so what about the existing contracts? Do the existing contracts need any change?
Definitely. Again, it depends on the maturity levels, right? Because usually what happens is, Akhil, in any organization, there is, we do have standard form contracts which do contain certain standard data protection language as well. Now, with the advent of DPDPA, what needs to be done is a reference to the DPDPA should definitely be included, right? Along with its rules, amendments, so on and so forth. So the law itself should be in place there in the contract so that it's applicable. That's point number one. Point number two, take a look at the standard clauses which exist in terms of a data protection perspective. See whether or not it kind of checks all the boxes from a DPDPA perspective, else it needs to be amended. If not, the other best alternative is to have one simple generic clause which simply says that all the data related transactions which are kind of taking place under that particular contract shall be governed by the DPDPA and all the other applicable data protection regulations as far as that particular contract is concerned. So that would be your overall kind of an approach, and it's a simpler approach as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Smitha. I wanted to know about the existing contract management process. Now, in order to stay compliant, what changes should organization make in their existing contract management process? Do you have some tips on that?
Sure. Again, it depends on the maturity and the risk appetite of the organizations, right? For example, in our organization, we recently implemented CLM tool, right? So that means that any lawyer sitting in any part of the world has access to all the contracts, right? Where, of course, the standard form contracts are already located. And in terms of updating, the regional councils are constantly taking a look at all the contracts to see, what's missing or what needs to be updated. Regular, interference definitely is required. Thirdly, from again a maturity perspective, whether or not the third parties that the organization deals with is actually equipped to have such sophisticated system or not. I think that's the thing, because ultimately if the organization is very mature, and then if the third party that you're dealing with does not have access to any of these new age tools, you will be going back to basics, or the chalkboard, right, where you really share a Word document, comes back with a red line, and so on and so forth. That's how you do it. Now, other than that, I think a couple of other yeah, in terms of internal controls which are in places. If it's a complex transaction, then definitely you do require a senior resource to kind of do justice to it and work on it, right? Whereas smaller things like NDAs, most of the organization, as far as I am aware, are already automated. No lawyer actually steps in, and they do have fallback clauses as well, one or two fallback options. If all those options are exhausted, only then the NDAs actually go to the particular regional attorneys, right? So this is how I think legal, the CLM tools have progressed. And of course, there are many other aspects like jurisdictional aspects and so on and so forth, which are already being dealt with by these new age tools. So it's a good thing actually.
Touched upon CLM tools. Now, how does CLM tools like Zoho contracts, for example, help in achieving as well as maintaining compliance with DPDPA or other laws?
Absolutely. I think these new age tools are made for compliance, right? See, because A, it is transparent. B, you know where the contracts are located because it's a tool. So you know where the data center is and so on and so forth. So you kind of have a visibility. And point number three, I think the tools are built, so that the regulatory requirements are kind of met, right? More or less, what normally happens is that if there is personal sensitive information flowing out of Europe in particular, and if there are no data transfer agreements in place, then that data actually cannot leave EU, right? So I think these tools kind of already have these access control mechanisms in place, so that that particular data actually doesn't even flow out of EU, right? So that's how you kind of stay compliant and stay protected, right? Now, the flip side of it is, in fact, there are these many jurisdictions where data protection laws are kind of still at their nascent stage, or they don't even have any laws. Again, what happens in those jurisdictions is that the organizations normally take up the higher standard. Right now, I think everybody agrees that GDPR is sort of the highest standard, and those standards are actually made applicable for these other minor countries without any data protection laws or with minimal data protection laws. So I think that way the bar is already set high, right? And last but not the least, like I mentioned a while ago, all since most of the members of the legal team already know and have access, they need not stumble upon any other thing. And I think in fact the CLM tools actually optimize a lot of things, right, thereby reducing the entire negotiation of the life cycle of the contract. So I think that's a big win for all stakeholders involved in the contract negotiation.
Smitha, before wrapping up, one final question. Now, as this digital landscape continues to evolve, what future trends do you foresee in the intersection of data protection law and contract management? What should organizations do or practice so that they are always ahead in the compliance game?
Sure. I think this is a tough question. The one word that came to my mind, Akhil, is that confusion. Right? Because forget any other country, right? I mean, take India for example.
Yes.
There are so many new sectoral laws, especially in the field of consumer, right? I mean, there are these intermediaries, and there are these new age platform laws, and then you have your fintech regulations. Plus, you have all your old laws as well, right? So, I mean, sometimes I really wonder, where are we going, right? And then you have all these laws on one hand, and on the other hand, you have the privacy law as well. So somewhere, I think, where in terms of future are we heading, to answer that question, I think, as you're probably already aware that a new digital bill would come into or the digital act would be passed in India, right? Which would probably, I'm assuming, will be the answer to most of these questions. Because right now, from where I am standing, to be very honest, I see that there is an overlap of so many laws, right? So if you comply one, you may not be complying with the other. We are in that stage, right? So I think, but the good thing or the flip side of all of this is that at least government is thinking, so are the citizens, and citizens are, in fact, in India today are more informed. They understand privacy because culturally, like everybody knows, in India the concept of privacy, in fact, did not exist at all, right? And then came this Puttaswamy judgment and all of that, and then, oh, okay, there is this, and then came GDPR. Then people are like, oh, okay, there is that also. And then things like, okay, I mean, mobile phones, everything you just click, you have to accept. If not, whatever. There were the huge debate at one point 3-4 years ago on these practical aspects as well. Owing to all this, at least new laws are coming up, right? But it's just a matter of consolidating and making sure that all what's already there, kind of makes sense. I think that's where, as a country, we are heading, especially as far as privacy is concerned. Yes, I'd be more, happy to see the new digital bill, which kind of would, I assume, again, that interplays between the existing DPDPA as well. And I think that will be the future of privacy as far as India is concerned.
Thank you so much, Smitha. It's been a wonderful conversation. Your insights on DPDPA as well as on contract management were truly exhaustive. And I'm sure that our audiences will derive a lot of value from our conversation. Thank you for joining us, Smitha.
My pleasure, Akhil, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. And I really hope that this benefits all. Thank you once again.